Welcome to Course 4, Module 5, Chapter 13, Organizational Behavior in Circular Supply Chains. This session focuses on the human side of circularity. The chapter argues that circular supply chains do not succeed through technology or logistics alone. They require leadership, cultural change, and redesigned incentives that help people work differently. We will examine why organizations resist circular models, how leaders can break down silos between procurement, design, and reverse logistics, and why middle managers are essential change intermediaries. We will also discuss stewardship culture, green human resource practices, executive compensation, sales incentives, and 3 applied cases. Renault, Tata Steel, and PTT Global Chemical. The central message is simple. Circular supply chains are built by aligning people, routines, metrics, and purpose. Use these notes as a calm narration track that introduces the learning journey clearly. Today we begin with the introduction, which explains why human resistance and corporate inertia are central barriers to circular supply chains. Then we move into leadership strategies for dismantling organizational silos, followed by the role of circular innovation task forces in connecting functions and external partners. The next section focuses on middle management resistance and the change frameworks that help translate strategy into daily routines. After that, we discuss how to cultivate a culture of stewardship through green human resource management and employee engagement. The chapter then turns to incentives, executive compensation, circular KPIs, and sales models. Finally, we review real-world applications and close with the overall conclusion. Now we introduce circular transitions as human transformations. The key point is that resistance, corporate inertia, and familiar linear routines often block circular supply chains before technical barriers do. This slide highlights 3 connected ideas. First, human resistance slows circular adoption because linear models feel familiar, convenient, and culturally normal. Employees and consumers may hesitate when circular routines require new behaviors or different definitions of value. Second, corporate inertia anchors organizations to existing processes. Established firms often protect optimized workflows, short-term financial priorities, and departmental structures that make circular change difficult. Third, the response is adaptive capacity. The chapter emphasizes cognitive diversity, dynamic capabilities, and flexible organizational design as ways to recognize tensions and manage them productively. The key takeaway is that circularity succeeds when leaders redesign behavior, routines, and incentives, not only when they improve the movement of materials. This is why organizational behavior is treated here as a core circular supply chain capability. Here we move from resistance to readiness. On the left side are the forces that keep linear systems in place. Cultural norms make familiar models feel natural. Short-term pressure encourages managers to protect current financial results instead of experimenting. Rigid routines reinforce functional silos, while knowledge friction prevents information from moving across departments. The shift towards circular readiness happens when organizations deliberately build new capabilities. Cognitive diversity helps managers see circular tensions from multiple perspectives. Collaboration helps supply chain actors solve problems that no single department can address alone. Experimentation allows firms to test new models before scaling them. In other words, readiness is not a mood. It is an organizational capability that must be built. Leaders must therefore create conditions where new routines feel safe, useful, and repeatable. Now we have a look on how leaders dismantle silos between procurement, design, and reverse logistics. The focus is systems thinking, dynamic capabilities, and lifecycle integration across circular supply chains. This slide explains the leadership move from silos to systems thinking. In traditional organizations, procurement, design, and reverse logistics can behave like separate islands, each optimizing its own metric. Systems thinking leadership views them as one interconnected feedback system. A design choice affects disassembly and repair. A supplier decision affects recyclability and material recovery. A reverse logistics constraint should influence product architecture before launch, not after customers are finished with the product. The chapter argues that leaders must anticipate these interdependencies and coordinate around shared circular outcomes. This is not simply more communication between departments. It is a redesign of operating logic, so the supply chain is managed as a circular value system. Ask listeners to notice how every circular decision creates consequences somewhere else in the chain. Dynamic capabilities turn circular ambition into repeatable routines. The chapter explains that firms need capabilities at 3 levels. At the individual level, managers require demand intelligence, market intelligence, and strategic design skills. These help them understand changing customer needs, emerging circular opportunities, and the implications of sustainability goals. At the process level, organizations need material planning, life cycle assessment, and purchasing routines that make circular choices practical. At the structural level, supplier selection, contracts, and governance must be redesigned to support circular objectives. The point is that circularity cannot depend on isolated champions. It must be built into people, processes, and structures so that circular decisions become part of normal work. This makes capability development an ongoing management discipline rather than a one-off sustainability project. Now we are introducing circular innovation task forces. These cross-functional groups help organizations coordinate procurement, design, reverse logistics, sales, data teams, and partners to test and scale circular business models. This slide presents a circular innovation task force as an operating model. At the center is the task force itself, surrounded by the functions that must collaborate. Procurement contributes supplier knowledge and material choices. Design contributes modularity, repairability, and lifecycle thinking. Reverse logistics contributes knowledge about collection, sorting, and remanufacturing. Sales and service contribute customer insight and relationship management. Digital and data teams provide visibility, tracking, and experimentation support. External partners bring capabilities the firm does not own internally. The important point is that circular innovation requires coordination across all these actors. The task force becomes the place where information is combined, trade-offs are discussed, and circular experiments are structured. Present the model as a working forum where circular trade-offs can be resolved openly. Internal task forces are necessary, but the chapter stresses that they must connect beyond the firm. Circular supply chains often face systemic inadequacies that one company cannot solve alone. For example, recovery infrastructure, material standards, and customer participation may depend on partners across the value chain. Inter-firm collaboration helps organizations pool resources and develop new circular norms. Meta-organizations can also broker relationships between multiple actors and establish shared material agendas. Strategic environmental orientation and digital transformation then help embed innovation into sustainability goals. The key message is that circular innovation is both an internal coordination challenge and a value chain reconfiguration challenge. Firms must learn to collaborate across organizational boundaries. This is why partner selection, trust, and shared data become strategic parts of circular transformation. This slide emphasizes experimentation before scaling circular business models. The chapter explains that circular models are often uncertain because companies must test new value propositions, customer behaviors, operational routines, and partner arrangements. The first step is to contextualize. Define the variables that matter in the specific circular setting. The second step is to test. Run real-world experiments before making a full-scale commitment. The third step is to co-structure. Adapt the model together with partners and internal teams as learning emerges. Finally, organizations scale only after the model has been validated. This approach reduces risk and builds organizational capabilities. It also helps people trust the transition because they can learn through evidence rather than abstract promises. For the audience, the main lesson is to treat experimentation as disciplined learning, not delay. Now we are focusing on middle managers. They can resist circular change, but when empowered through structured frameworks, they become interpreters, facilitators, and practical translators of strategy. This slide reframes middle managers as change intermediaries. Their first role is interpretation. They translate executive circular goals into department-level meaning, explaining what changes for teams, workflows, and priorities. Their second role is support. During disruptive transitions, they help employees maintain continuity and confidence while new practices are introduced. Their third role is feedback. Middle managers can surface operational barriers early, including workload problems, role conflicts, missing information, or unclear accountability. Resistance declines when these managers are empowered rather than blamed. If they are involved transparently and given the authority to adapt routines, they become essential bridges between strategy and execution. Circular change then becomes more credible and practical. In narration, emphasize that empowerment changes their identity from blockers to practical architects of change. The 8S framework helps translate circular strategy into routines. It asks leaders to align strategy, structure, systems, style, staff, skills, shared values, and subordinate goals. In circular transformations, this alignment is critical because changing one element without the others creates friction. For example, a company may announce a circular strategy, but if reporting systems still reward only short-term volume, managers will return to linear behavior. If staff lack new skills, redesigned processes will not work. If shared values remain focused on departmental control, collaboration will be limited. The framework therefore acts as an alignment lens. It helps leaders check whether the organization is truly prepared to support circular business process redesign. Use this framework as a checklist for whether circular change is supported by the whole organization. Institutional plurality means that organizations must manage competing logics at the same time. On one side is the legacy operational logic, departmental control, familiar metrics, existing power positions, and established ways of judging success. On the other side is the circular economy logic, systems thinking, cross-functional accountability, life cycle value, and attention to societal challenges. The chapter argues that leaders should not simply force circularity into old compartments. Instead, they need blending strategies that reconsider roles, structures, and processes. Inclusive and transparent change processes are especially important because resistance can reflect political concerns and perceived loss of control. Circular transformation therefore requires both structural redesign and careful attention to organizational power dynamics. This is especially important when circular goals challenge established authority, budgets, and performance measures. Cultivating a corporate culture of stewardship. Circularity becomes durable when environmental and social responsibility are embedded into daily decisions, employee behavior, training, recognition, and organizational values. This slide emphasizes that stewardship culture is infrastructure, not decoration. A company can publish sustainability statements, but circularity becomes real only when environmental and social stewardship influence everyday decisions. The chapter notes that green culture can strengthen environmental and social performance and broader sustainable development performance. Culture is shaped by leadership values, organizational history, HR practices, and the wider industrial ecosystem. When these elements reinforce one another, employees are more likely to see circular actions as part of their role. The key message is that stewardship is not a communications campaign. It is a pattern of expectations, practices, and reinforcement that helps people make sustainable choices without waiting for special permission. This helps explain why culture must be managed as seriously as technology, finance, or logistics. Green human resource management turns culture into behavior. The chapter identifies several practices that help institutionalize stewardship. Green recruitment brings in people who already value sustainability. Environmental training builds action competence. so employees know how to apply circular principles in their own work. Performance management makes green behavior visible and discussable. Rewards and recognition reinforce desired actions, including through non-monetary incentives. The chapter also highlights employee-led committees and action-oriented training as ways to deepen engagement. The mechanism is important. HR practices mediate between corporate sustainability goals and actual employee behavior. In practical terms, circularity becomes stronger when HR systems recruit, train, evaluate, and recognize people in ways that support sustainable routines. Emphasize that employees need both motivation and practical competence to act sustainably every day. Even when organizations want a stewardship culture, structural gaps can slow implementation. The chapter identifies several common challenges. HR and CSR strategies often remain separated, which makes it harder to turn sustainability intentions into employee practices. Green human resource management is still not mature or widely adopted across all industries. Many strategies underweight long-term societal impact because standard business planning remains focused on nearer-term outcomes. Context also matters. Managerial norms, workplace expectations, and policy environments influence what is feasible. These gaps do not make stewardship impossible, but they show why culture building requires deliberate design. The payoff is resilience. A workforce able to make sustainable choices without waiting for central direction. For presenters, this slide is a useful reminder that culture requires governance, resources, and patience. Now we are shifting to executive compensation and circular KPIs. The message is that leaders pursue what organizations reward, so incentives must include measurable circular and sustainability outcomes. This slide contrasts two incentive logics. In the traditional emphasis, pay follows finance. Executive attention is drawn toward short-term returns, even when circular initiatives require longer learning cycles and operational redesign. In the circular emphasis, pay follows purpose. Sustainability-related compensation, ESG-linked pay, and circular KPIs help align leadership motivation with environmental and social goals. The chapter notes an important nuance. Sustainability-linked pay can improve sustainability performance even when short-term financial benefits are less immediate. Therefore, boards and investors need to understand the time horizon of circular value creation. The critical design challenge is to create incentives that are measurable and credible, without reducing circularity to symbolic targets. This distinction helps explain why circular transitions often require new conversations in the boardroom. Executive pay should link purpose to measurable outcomes. The chapter explains that CSR criteria in compensation can strengthen long-term orientation, support green innovation, and reduce emissions. Non-financial measures can also work as lead indicators of future value, especially when they capture customer satisfaction, innovation capability, or lifecycle performance. ESG-linked compensation may reduce decoupling by tightening the connection between public sustainability claims and actual practice. However, the chapter also warns that circular metrics can become fragmented if they are poorly designed. Leaders should therefore reward concrete milestones, such as repairability, reuse, emissions reduction, or recovery rates, while ensuring that metrics are integrated across functions and product life stages. Circular KPIs need a value chain view. A single financial measure cannot capture whether circularity is working across the product lifecycle. At the design stage, KPIs might track modularity, repairability, or disassembly readiness. In procurement, they might track recycled content, supplier circularity, or material traceability. During use, they might measure product life extension, service performance, or customer retention. At end of life, they might track take-back rates, sorting quality, remanufacturing, and recycling outcomes. The management purpose is to guide decisions, not simply report activity. The chapter emphasizes that circular indicators must be consistent, holistic, and connected to strategy so leaders can see where value is preserved or lost. In narration, connect each KPI to decisions managers can actually influence across the value chain. Now we are diving into sales incentives. Circular business models require moving beyond volume-based quotas towards subscriptions, renewals, retention, take-back responsibilities, and long-term customer value. This slide compares volume-based quota plans with incentives for product as a service and take-back models. Volume plans reward isolated, one-time sales and encourage attention to top-line revenue. They fit poorly with circular models, where profitability depends on retention, renewal, service quality, and material return. Pass and take-back incentives should reward durable customer relationships, customer education, and circular responsibilities. Sales teams may need to prioritize renewal rates, service performance, margin quality, and collection participation rather than simply more units sold. The chapter's practical point is that circular selling is consultative. It requires relationship management, customer learning, and alignment with long-term value, so compensation must reinforce those behaviors. Make clear that compensation signals what kind of customer relationship the company truly wants. Over time, motivating sales teams requires careful incentive design. The chapter stresses that compensation should remain understandable because overly complex systems can reduce motivation. Bonuses, quotas, and commissions should reinforce long-term circular goals without confusing salespeople about what matters. Managers should also consider the intrinsic value of individual salespeople, meaning their potential contribution to strategic objectives, not only their past sales volume. Training is equally important because circular models require consultative selling and customer relationship capabilities. The incentive system should make the circular business model easier to sell, not harder. When rewards, training, and customer messages are aligned, sales teams can support subscriptions, take-back programs, and profitable circular relationships. The strongest plans are simple enough to understand and strategic enough to shift behavior. This section addresses the case of Renault, Tata Steel, and PTT Global Chemical. These cases show circular transformation as leadership, collaboration, culture, capability building, and ecosystem coordination. Renault's refactory shows how an established automotive plant can be reorganized around circular mobility. The Flins site moved away from a purely linear assembly logic and toward activities such as electric battery repair, part remanufacturing, vehicle retrofitting, and materials recovery. The organizational behavior challenge was significant because employees and middle managers were used to optimizing linear throughput. They had to interpret circular goals, maintain operational continuity, and learn new routines. The case also illustrates systems thinking. End-of-life vehicles are not treated as waste, but as inputs for new manufacturing loops. Renault's experience connects several chapter themes: dismantling silos, empowering middle managers, integrating reverse logistics, and building dynamic capabilities through experimentation. Tata Steel illustrates circularity in a very different industrial context. The company shifted part of its material logic from iron ore dependency toward a more formalized ferrous scrap model. This mattered because the Indian scrap ecosystem has often been informal, fragmented, and difficult to coordinate. Tata Steel acted as a meta-organizer by connecting scrapyards, processes, and industrial actors around a cleaner, more reliable material agenda. The case also shows the importance of procurement capabilities, interfirm collaboration, and workforce education. Training programs and internal reuse of byproducts help reinforce the zero-waste goal. Overall, the example demonstrates that circular supply chains often require companies to organize ecosystems, not only internal processes. This case also shows how circularity can create order and quality in fragmented material markets. PTT Global Chemical shows how a circular platform can combine community engagement with industrial capability. The U-Turn platform collects, separates, and transports post-consumer plastics, while partnerships with public entities, universities, and foundations expand participation. The collected material can then feed ENVICCO, a major recycling facility that produces high-value recycled resins. The case demonstrates that technology alone is not enough. Consumer behavior, corporate coordination, and social stewardship are all necessary to close plastic loops. It also connects to circular innovation task forces because multiple functions and partners must collaborate continuously. The broader lesson is that a resilient circular supply chain depends on both community participation and the industrial systems that convert recovered materials into value. Circular supply chains are not only operational changes. They are organizational behavior transformations. They require new routines, collaboration, and incentives. Leaders must break silos by connecting procurement, design, sales, and reverse logistics around shared lifecycle goals. Middle managers are essential because they translate strategy into daily practice and help reduce resistance. A stewardship culture also matters. Green HRM, training, recognition, and employee engagement make circular behavior part of everyday work. Finally, incentives must support circular outcomes. Executive KPIs and sales rewards should prioritize lifecycle value, retention, take-back, and sustainability impact. Overall, circular transformation succeeds when strategy, culture, structure, and incentives are aligned. Thank you for your attention. Next, we continue with Module 5, Chapter 14.